Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call this Committee of Adjustment hearings to order. Just before we get started this evening, we're going to go over the protocols for tonight's hearing. We have currently 7 applications for 4 different properties that we'll be hearing this evening. And I'm just going to kind of briefly go over the procedure. A few housekeeping rules for those that have cell phones. If you can please put them on mute, just like I'm about to do, or turn them off. And if you are addressing committee members or asking a question of staff or anyone, please address your questions through the chair, not directly to the person that you're asking the question of. The first order of business will be to ask any committee members if they have any conflicts of interest with any of the applications that are on the agenda this evening. Following that, a request will be made for any deferrals or withdrawals of applications that are on the agenda. The Secretary-Treasurer will then read out each application noted on the agenda with a brief description and staff recommendation. The applicant or the agent for the applicant will be allowed to come forward. There's to the podium on my right, or if they are online, we'll bring them into the meeting that way. And I'll be allowed a short overview to add any other further details if they wish at that time. Committee members will then have the opportunity to ask the applicant any questions that they might have, followed by members of the public that wish to speak to an application. Any members of the public wishing to speak to an application will be asked to come forward, state their name and address for the record, try to limit their comments to 10 minutes, and must present all questions and comments that are pertinent to the application at that time. Persons making a presentation will not necessarily be allowed to return again to speak to the same application or sets of applications with regards to a property. Following all comments, the applicant will be afforded some closing comments if desired. The committee will then present a decision in the form of a motion. The motion will be discussed and voted upon. If a vote is tied, a motion will be defeated, and new motions will be made until a decision has been reached by the majority. Notices of decision will be provided to those persons who leave their name and address in writing with the Secretary-Treasurer. For those in attendance, there's a sign-in page at the back of the room for that purpose. And for people viewing online, they can email our Secretary-Treasurer, Taya, at taya.taraba@portcolborne.ca, or they can call 905-228-8124 immediately following the hearing and leave a message requesting notice. Those are the protocols for this evening. We do have one set of applications that are a continuation from last meeting. So when we get to that one, we'll introduce that one just slightly different, but basically the same protocols. So with that, is there any conflicts of interest this evening? Eric?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I have a conflict on items 820-25-PC and 821-25-PC, which are items 6.1 and 6.2 on the agenda. I have an indirect pecuniary interest as my employer has provided services in these applications.
Thank you. Not seeing anyone else. I don't believe there's any request for deferrals or withdrawals of applications this evening. We do have 2 applicants that will be online. And this evening, if you've ever watched before, we're going to do things slightly different. We're having some slight technical difficulties, but we are able to reach the applicants and bring them at least verbally online. So you might not be able to see them if you're watching via the web. Anyway, so with that, Madam Secretary, the first application, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On tonight's agenda, we have 4 minor variance applications and 2 consent applications. Notice of these applications were circulated to the public on November 4th. The required agencies received notice of these applications on October 14th. A recommendation report for these applications were prepared by planning staff and made publicly available on November 14th. All correspondence received by November 14th were addressed in the recommendation reports. Those interested can view the recommendation reports online on the city's website or in person at City Hall. Those interested may also contact planning staff in person, by email, or over the phone to obtain a copy of the reports. Accommodations for alternative methods of viewing or obtaining the recommendation reports are available upon request. Please note that the zoning bylaw currently in effect is the City of Port Colborne zoning bylaw 6575/30/18 as amended, which will henceforth be referred to as the zoning bylaw. Our first application for tonight is minor variance application A20-25-PC for the land municipally known as a vacant lot on Fair Street located in the 3rd Density Residential Zone as established in the zoning bylaw. The owner, Daniel Convello, is requesting relief from the provisions of the zoning bylaw to increase the maximum parking area width notwithstanding the following. That a maximum parking area width of 8.17 meters be permitted, whereas a maximum parking width area of 7.5 meters is required. Given the information in the recommendation report, planning staff recommend application A20-25-PC be granted. As the application is minor in nature, it is appropriate for the development of the site, is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, and is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan. That concludes correspondence for this application.
Thank you. And so I believe the applicant is online, and so we'll bring him in now, at least verbally.
Yes, hello.
Good evening. Is there anything you'd like to add at this time?
No, I believe Taya said everything. I think she covered everything.
Very good, thank you. Do any members of the committee have any questions of the applicant? Not seeing any. The only questions that I have, or maybe concern, is I realize you're going to have parking in the front of the building, which is great. I've seen, and basically the variance is to allow for a wider area for parking, and that you're gonna have 4 spots in the front portion of the property for that purpose, for 4 spots for the 4 dwelling units that you're gonna have. The only suggestion that I would have, and I'm not sure if it appeared in the staff report, is some sort of fencing along the northern property line. Simply because as you pull in with vehicles, the headlights of those vehicles will shine onto the neighboring properties. I'm going to deal with the one to the north, I think is the first one that we're dealing with. So it'll shine into the backyards of the other properties that are there. So I would be looking to see if you got a little short fence, I don't know, 4 feet tall or whatever, just to cover headlights shining into the backyards of those neighboring properties. Other than that, I don't necessarily have any other objections with respect to that. I do know in the staff report they amended it to limit this application to a 4-plex only, so that way those 4 spots, or the 4, I guess the 4 dwelling units can't be expanded on without coming back to the committee, and it limits those 4 spots to those 4 units. So I would be looking to add that as an additional condition to the variance as well. Other than that, I don't know if any other members have any questions. I think I've already asked and they said no. I will turn it to the floor if there's any members in the gallery here this evening that wish to speak to this particular application. Not seeing any. To the applicant, I don't know if you have any comments or closing comments that you like to add before we go to a motion?
Yeah, just going off of what you said, there is a plan to put a fence on the north side of that property, not only where they park, but all the way down.
Perfect. So with that, I don't have anything further unless any other committee members have anything. Can I look for someone to make a recommendation? Dave?
It's not. This A15, 18. How about that one? A20? Application A20-25-PC. The matter of the lands legally known as Part Lot 29 on Plan 843 RP R3 zone municipally known as vacant lot on Fair Street. Committee of Adjustment recommend the application be granted for the following reasons. Application A20-25-PC maintains a general intent and purpose of the official plan. 2, application A20-25-PC maintains the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. 3, application A2025 PC is desirable for the appropriate development of the land. 4, application A20-25 PC is minor in nature. Given the above information, Committee of Adjustment also recommend that application A20-25 PC be granted.
Thank you. A seconder to that? Gary? Questions or comments? All those in favor? That'll be carried. And while we have the applicant online, he's there for the next one, so I'll turn that floor over to Taya as well.
Our next application is minor variance application A2125 PC for the lands municipally known as a vacant lot in Fair Street, located in the 3rd density residential zone as established in the zoning bylaw. The owner, Daniel Cavello, is requesting relief from the provisions of the zoning bylaw to increase the maximum parking area width, notwithstanding the following. That the maximum parking area width of 8.17 meters be permitted, whereas a maximum parking area width of 7.5 meters is required. Given the information in the recommendation report, planning staff recommend application A2125 PC be granted. As the application is minor in nature, it is appropriate for the development of the site, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, and is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan. That concludes correspondence for this application.
Thank you, and I know we still have the applicant online, and I would assume, do you have any other further comments you'd like to add on this one?
I would say they're exactly the same as the other one. There'll be a fence going all the way down to the end of the property line to block any of the cars parking with headlights. It's exactly the same as the other one, basically the same size property. So, no, I don't have anything to add.
Very good, thank you. Any members have any questions? Not seeing any. The only comments I have is the same as the previous lot, and you've addressed those. Is there any members of the public that wish to speak to this application? Not seeing any. With that recommendation, Gary.
Just before doing that, to clarify for the first part, was your extra condition that the fence be constructed along the property line?
The northern property.
Northern property. Okay. Sure, Mr. Chair. With respect to application A21-25PC, known as Part Lot 28 on Plan 843, RP 59R17-126, Part 1 in the city of Port Colborne, municipally known as the vacant lot on Ferris Street, that the Committee of Adjustment recommend the application be granted for the following reasons. 1, application A2125-PC maintains the general intent and purpose of the official plan. 2, application A2125PC maintains the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. 3, application 2125PC is desirable for the appropriate development of the land. 4, application 2125PC is minor in nature. And the following conditions be added: that a fence be constructed on the northern boundary property line.
Thank you. Seconder to that, Dave. Questions or comments? All those in favor? That'll be carried. Thank you. Madam Secretary, the next application, please.
Our next application is consent application B1125PC for the lands municipally known as 639 Main Street West and a vacant lot on Main Street West. The agent Craig Rowe, on behalf of the owner Toddco Investments Inc., for consent to adjust the boundary of a property for the purposes of conveying lands which are currently being encroached upon the adjacent property. The subject parcels are shown as parts 1, 2, and 3 on the proposed sketch. Given the recommendation report, planning staff recommend that the respective consent application be granted, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated November 14th, 2025. That concludes correspondence for this application.
Thank you, and I believe the applicant is here this evening. The podium on the right, there's a gray little bar there, a little red button in the middle, and you can add anything further you like at this time.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I understand we have some technical difficulties tonight, so I'll kind of be brief in my comments, and I believe that you do have a copy of the consent sketch, maybe my presentation that I submitted. And as we do have some members of council that form this committee, I think it'd be beneficial, a little bit of a preview of what's coming in 2 weeks when we bring the related application. Essentially what we have is Todco Investments owns the large property that's north of Main Street West, south of Merritt Parkway in that area. It's been a long-standing vacant parcel in behind the old Port Pontiac and behind what's operating as B&C Truck Center right now. The owners of the owners of that land, Todco Investments, are looking to sell their property right now. And in order to make sure that they can move the property forward, they have to deal with any encumbrances or constraints that are on the property. One of the constraints that they encountered is that there's about a 0.6 acre encroachment right now by the B&C Truck Center. It's a graveled area with some outdoor storage. It's used as a bit of a lay-down area and for the trucks to maneuver around the building. That encroachment's been long-standing for about 20 years, but it has to be rectified right now because a portion of the Todco lands is being used illegally for a commercial purpose when it's in a residential designation in a residential zone. Our clients, Todco, and the owners of the B&C Truck Center 168, they've been able to come together and come to an agreement. And the plan to move everything forward is that they will be agreeing to sell that land to 168 to add it to the existing property known as 639 for their continued use as the automobile repair garage. So this is a two-phase application that we have right now. This is the first step, which is to get the provisional consent approval for part one. That's the triangular area. What we've done is we've deliberately shaped that in a way where it squares off at the top of that holding so we don't end up with any weird geometry with the remnant parcel that might affect future developability. So upon receiving this conditional consent, we're aware of conditions of approval that would be applied. In this case, in our own submissions, we recommended that it be subject to a zoning bylaw amendment to zone that triangle of land that's going to be transferred as highway commercial so that the continued lawful use of that land for highway commercial purposes can continue. By merging these lands together, the existing structure and use still remain in full compliance with the zoning bylaw. So it's a bit of a technical application, but there's a couple of steps to make it proper and appropriate and comply with all the city's planning documents. So following this meeting, if we're successful with provisional approval, we have a statutory public meeting coming up December 2nd for the related zoning bylaw amendment, and we understand a recommendation will be coming forward early in the new year. And then following all of that, satisfaction of conditions of approval, the property will be merged. Todco can continue on with the sale of their property, and B&C can continue on with their operation. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Not seeing any. Does any members of the public have any questions? This particular, no, not seeing any. So with that, I'm assuming you don't have anything further since no one raised any questions. Let's have someone have a recommendation, Dave. Or Eric, sorry.
An application B11-25-PC, part of Lot 32, Part 1, our reference plan 59R 5510 as 639 Main Street West, that the application be granted subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated November 19th, 2025.
Thank you. Seconder to that, Dave. See, I know you're in there somewhere. With that, if there's no other further questions or comments, all those in favor, that'll be carried. Thank you. All right. So the last bunch of applications that we have on the agenda this evening are reconvene. It's not a word. Reconvene from our last month's meeting with regards to Division Street, 252 Division Street. Typically, we would just continue on where we left off last month. I know there was a revised report and some new notices that were sent out. So at the last meeting, we had concluded public input, but because of the changes to the proposal, specifically with regards to, and I can't remember if it was 19 or 18. Is it 18 or 19? I can't remember. The new created lot. There was some changes there that would have been beyond our original scope, so the re-notification went out. So that one for sure, we will open it up for discussion, and since they're all tied together, we'll kind of go right back to the start. So before we go too far, I was going to get our Secretary Treasurer to read out the new reports or summaries. But before that, Eric has a question.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to just get your opinion as to whether or not we should have if anyone wants to speak to this application for opening it up, that they don't repeat themselves from what they said at the previous time. So I just want to make sure that's clear to those that are speaking.
Very good. We can so clarify before we get to the public comments. So with that, Madam Secretary, the revised reports.
Our last applications for tonight are consent application B1025PC and its two accompanying minor variance applications A1825PC and A1925PC. The subject lands are municipally known as 252 Division Street, located in the first density residential zone, and were first heard on October 8, 2025's Committee of Adjustment hearing. In application B1025PC, the owner Frank Gersick is requesting the Committee of Adjustment's consent to sever for the purpose of creating a new residential lot. Subject parcels are shown as parts 1 and 2 in the proposed sketch, where part 1 is retained for an existing residential use and part 2 is to be severed for future residential use. In application A1825PC, the owner is requesting relief from the provisions of the zoning bylaw to permit a reduction in the interior side setback, notwithstanding the following: that a minimum interior side yard setback of 1.2 meters be permitted, whereas a minimum interior side yard setback of 1.5 meters is required. In application A1925PC, the owner is requesting relief from the provisions of the zoning bylaw to permit a reduction in the minimum lot frontage, minimum front yard setback, minimum interior yard setback, notwithstanding the following: that a minimum lot frontage of 12.1 meters be permitted, where a minimum lot frontage of 15 meters is required. The minimum front yard setback of 4 meters be permitted, whereas a minimum front yard setback of 6.5 meters is required. And an interior side yard setback of 0.77 centimeters for the accessory structure be permitted, whereas an interior side yard setback of 1 meters is required. Given the information in the recommendation report, planning staff recommend that application A1825PC be granted for the following reasons. The application is minor in nature, it is appropriate for the development of the site, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan. Given the information in the recommendation report, planning staff also recommend that application A1925PC be granted for the following reasons. The application is minor in nature, it is appropriate for the development of the site, it is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw, and is desirable and in compliance with the general intent and purpose of the official plan. Planning staff also recommend that application B1025PC be granted, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report dated November 14th, 2025. That concludes correspondence for this application.
Thank you. And I believe the applicant is online.
Yes. He should be in the room now.
Can you just confirm or ask him to speak to confirm?
Frank, can you hear us?
Hi, sorry, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. We're just having some technical difficulties, so we're only going to have to correspond via my microphone on my desk, but everybody can still hear you.
Okay, great.
Is there anything further you'd like to add at this time?
Only that we made clarification to the application that was, as was last recommended by the council, and I think we've cleaned up the application and it speaks for itself. But I am available to answer any questions if the council has any.
Very good. And just for a point of clarity, even though we have councillors on here, we're not council, we're the Committee of Adjustment. So just for a point of clarity.
Okay, thank you for that.
No worries. So with that, does any committee members have any questions based on the new reports or changes? Dave.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Eric. I guess my biggest concern is on B1025PC, where it's in regard to the garage that's existing still being able to be left. Where it says that, and I'd have to go right back to section 2.8.1 AI, requires a principal building to exist prior to an accessory structure. And in 3D on B1025PC, it says the applicant enters either enters into a development agreement or temporary use bylaw to legalize the location of the garage on part 2, or the applicant remove the garage from part 2. Can you just expand on what the development agreement does or what the temporary use bylaw does for that, that fact?
Yeah, certainly. And through the chair, thank you for the question. This recommendation, it's really, we're looking for a way, the applicant has expressed an interest in keeping that building that will, if the lot is created and that building's on it, as we understand it, it becomes out of conformity as it's an accessory structure without a primary dwelling. So by entering into a development agreement, we could reflect the conditions of the minor variance, we could reflect the conditions of the consent, and there could be an agreement in place about when a structure's built to the new dwelling, some parameters around when the timing for that will occur, and the uses that would be permitted or limited in that garage until that primary dwelling exists. So we're not going to see it turned into a contractor's storage building or a business running out of it with no home on the lot. So really that's the intention is to use one of those tools, either that development agreement or the temporary use bylaw, to restrict the uses in the garage and to encourage or put in place some requirements for a dwelling to exist in the identifiable future.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members got any questions? Eric.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. Is there, I'm trying to look at this, okay, the sketch is pulled up. Wouldn't there need to be some variances for part one? I'm just, for the wood deck? It looks like it's going like right to the line, to the proposed line.
Through the chair, if we look in the report at condition 3B under the consent, we've indicated that there's a hot tub that's shown, there's a concrete pad that's shown, and a deck with a ramp. We would have those removed from part two. So that's the part two piece. And then structures, so under condition 3C, structures that encroach into the interior side yard of part one, which would be the deck, would be removed.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Eric, you good? Yes. Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the Chief Planner. With respect to your further description to Member Elliott, so what happens if that 18-month period, the new house isn't built? Are we back here again? Is he in violation? What happens then?
It's through the chair. It's a fair question. I mean, there are instances where you can extend a temporary use bylaw, so there could be an extension of that, another 12 months given. But ultimately, it would become a zoning conformity matter, and we could proceed with charges under the zoning bylaw for a building that doesn't conform. It's not an ideal circumstance to have to be in. We would hope that really the development agreement or the temporary use bylaw does encourage the dwelling to be built. But if not, there are extension provisions, and there are legal routes that we can pursue if they're not.
The reason I ask that question is in today's market, we've seen developments that were supposed to start are not starting, draft plans that are delayed, draft plans that ask for extension because market conditions aren't favorable, and it goes on and on. And so I have that concern. Beyond a 1-year extension, which I'm not too excited about, is that the end of the line? I mean, at the end of the day, is there a provision to just remove that garage?
Through the chair, the temporary use bylaw would be approved by council. So ultimately, it would be a council decision as to how far they wish to extend that. But at the end of the line, if the temporary use bylaw ceases to exist, then the removal of the structure becomes the next step.
I'm loath to ask this question, but we're in a public forum and so everybody might hear it. Can that become an ADU? Accessory dwelling? My concern is you then have a house
Yeah.
and you apply the provisions of the new bylaw for ADUs and all of a sudden you have an ADU. I guess notwithstanding, the person could do that, but they might have to meet new building code, new regulations, new side yard, rear yard, all that stuff, which as an existing use might grandfather him there.
Through the chair, it could not become an ADU without a primary building. But if the house, if a new dwelling is constructed, and if the new dwelling, under the city's ADU bylaw, the ADU is allowed to have 45% of the floor area of the primary dwelling. So if all of those criteria aligned, and if the property could provide the parking space and meet the parameters, then yes, I suppose it could be converted, but as noted, it would have to go through the building code. There would be a little bit of work to turn it into that, but yes, it could, in theory. But if that garage was not there and a dwelling was built there, an ADU could also be built on the property, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Eric?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just going off Member Bruno's points. Just like if a primary dwelling was not built, that garage could still be renovated or converted into potentially a primary residence in the event it could happen, correct?
Through the chair, yes, I suppose like the applicant could apply for a renovation permit, add on to the garage, and turn that into the dwelling. Yeah, that is a possibility.
Any other questions? The only thing I have is that I know from last month to this month, I believe the original application requested a 3-meter setback. It's now been changed to a 4-meter setback. The side yard, I think it was 1.2 last month, which is now 1.5. And for those watching, you'll see that that request has disappeared because the 1.5 does comply with the current zoning bylaw. So that's why it doesn't appear again today. I still have concerns that 4 meters will still set the front of that dwelling, proposed dwelling, ahead of the neighboring lot to the east. Because based on from what I can determine, that neighboring property to the east, which fronts onto Division Street, is set back 7 meters-ish. Based on Niagara Navigator, I don't have an exact survey of that. So it would appear that that property is in compliance. There are only on this side of the street, in this particular area of Division Street, there's only that dwelling and this particular proposed new dwelling. The existing one is set way back in. So I still have an issue with that 4-meter setback for the purpose of saving a garage. That probably needs renovations anyway. So from that perspective, I'm still hesitant to approve that particular condition. The side yard setbacks for the other parts, if the garage is not saved, may be moot, because that's where the 0.77 meter setback comes into play. So then we're just left with the frontage of request of 12.1 where 15 is required, of which I do not have any objections to. It's a fairly deep lot. You can make a smaller, narrower property and have plenty of room to accommodate that particular situation. So that's kind of where I stand. I don't know if the applicant wants to address that before we turn it over to public comments, but that's kind of where I sit at the moment, unless I can be convinced otherwise why that should be allowed. Anyway, so with that, I don't know if the applicant has any comments to add to that, or we could turn it over to the public.
Can I speak? Can you hear me?
We can. The floor is yours.
Yeah, so I'm trying to develop a beautiful single-family home in conjunction with the existing community. And like I mentioned in the previous meeting, I would strongly suggest approximately 90% of the homes in that neighborhood sit much closer to the road than what I'm proposing. And I've even moved the home further back at the request of the council, and hence still requesting the minor variance. I have no intention of turning that garage into any type of additional dwelling unit. It is a cinder block built garage, so it is, I'll say, impossible to move without tearing down at a significant expense. And I will be resurfacing the outside of that garage, so it will match the newly built structure and be visually, aesthetically appealing from the roadway and from all facets of the view. And then additionally, at my own expense, obviously I'm going to have to put in a new driveway and a new garage on my existing property, as I will not have one if this severance goes through. So I'm asking the committee for a simple minor variance, so that I can build this new single family home.
Very good. Gary?
Mr. Chair, not to that, but to your point, I wanted to go to the planner, but I know we're going to go to the public. Through you to the chief planner, we had a conversation about another development earlier this week, and I referred to the word snout houses, which some you've seen built after the fact, and they stick out usually the garage, and they don't make a linear plane along the street. And I don't know if this is a proper analogy here, but that 4 meters here could represent everything torn down, a new house, snout, not maintaining that plane across the front. And yet, correct me if I'm wrong, the understanding I had that the province is no longer put restrictions on people doing that. Do I have that right or somewhat misguided?
Through the chair, I don't think it's incorrect. No, I think you're correct. Yeah.
So to the chair's point, if the gentleman tore everything down, put a new house there, he could extend in a similar fashion and build a house, leaving there no longer being a plane there. Is that correct?
Through the chair, I'm not sure that's fully the intention of what the province's change is, but I can see where I can see where you're headed with it, and I think I can agree with it. Yeah.
So just for a point of clarity, so you're telling me that even though the front yard setback is 6 meters, you can have a garage sticks out past the 6 meter setback?
There was, well, years ago, there's a house on Clarence Street between Rosemount and Homewood that is snout and was roundly objected back then, and I think it went to all kinds of levels. But now, apparently, you can't object to that, if I'm, again, hearing the planner correctly.
Through the chair, no, I think like in this instance, it does need to meet the front yard setback, regardless of whether it's sticking out or not. That needs to that does need to meet the setback. But what we're seeing is in new developments, we're typically setting the zoning to accommodate the structures that are proposed. So we're not using the existing or the standard, say, setbacks within an R2 zone. We're using a special or a custom zoning to reflect the building types that are going to be built in a new development. But when fitting in a a structure into an existing neighborhood, the setbacks are very important, and that's really why we're here tonight, is to discuss that.
All right, anyone else have any questions? Okay, we will open it up to the floor. So whoever would like to come first, podium on the right. Again, there's a red button in the middle. To the point that was raised earlier, if you were here at the last meeting and you spoke, and please don't reiterate the same comments, but really if there's any additional comments you'd like to add at this time, the floor is yours. Just your name and address for the record, and where you go.
Yep, Carrie Danis, 243 Division Street, again across the street from 252 Division Street. I'll try my absolute best not to repeat myself from comments made over 6 weeks ago off the top of my head, so my apologies if something does get overlapped. Again, I didn't bring my comments with me. I think that that's a fair lenience there. Mr. Chair, I'd just like to say I do agree with you that the 4 meters is a concern. It does jut out from that. The property to the east that you referenced is almost 8.9 meters back, more than 7. I've looked at the new requests on the variance setbacks, and every single one of them was actually made worse. So we go from 12.4 on the October 6th meeting to now 12.1. We go from 1.1 to 0.77 for a side yard. We've added 1 meter from the 3 meters, which is 100 centimeters. And the side yard that was 1.1 meter, he's increased it to 1.2. That's 10 centimeters. I noted that while Eric's report was much more, the chief planner's report was much more comprehensive this time around. I do appreciate that. I know that Angie and myself had both commented on the sight lines previously, and a engineer technologist was basically, I'm assuming consulted. I'm not sure if they work for the city or not, but all the comments stated was there's no sightline issues with this lot. It didn't talk about the fact that it's going to be over 1,800 square foot 2-story dwelling, approximately 6 meters from the road, 60 meters from a corner. There's, transportation association, they require certain triangle sightlines to be met when it's that close to an intersection. The MTO requires certain sightline expectations. Again, I know we talked about sightlines before, and apologies, but I think that does need to be brought up because, again, it said the lot. It didn't mention the dwelling. So this engineer technologist, did he have a report drawn up? Did he come down? Did he look at the blueprints that were given to him that we have all a copy of how big this property is going to be? Again, I think the existence of this garage is purely based on the fact that if there wasn't a garage there, there's nothing there to encumbrance him from moving it back to 6.5 meters, which is the bylaw. If he has this garage there, he can put this as far forward as he wants. I know in the last meeting he stated that the intent is that he is going to, and his family are going to move into the new build. We don't know what's going to happen to the existing lot, the existing home that he converted into a duplex or in-law suite in the front. I also noted that the severance is approved on 13 conditions. You list 6, but you added 8 under section 3. So that's 13 total conditions. In my line of work, I associate the risks with property dwellings, severances, and what liens banks have against properties. Is it in our favor? What risks adhere to this? So very familiar with that. And all I can see is that it just appears that this garage is so important to him so that there's not a building points a house, and not just a garage, but a 2-story dwelling, not 0.77, meters away from his existing home. So he pushes it forwards. The markability of the existing home stays there because there's no house, an arm's width away from it. Again, keeping that garage, it's 0.77 meters from that house. Ontario Building Code fire building code is 1.2 meters. Port Colborne's bylaw is 1 meter, so those contradict each other. I'm not sure why. But again, the fire department was consulted, and it said the dwelling has to be addressed. The comments from the staff were this was addressed in condition 2.A, and all that mentioned was, oh, okay, yeah, like he can keep it if he gets a temporary use bylaw. It doesn't address the fire safety concerns. How does that appease the fire chief that he can approve to like not turn it into a junk shop or a garage or a business or whatever he wants to do?
So let me interject
Yeah,
real
no
quick
problem.
right there. With regards to the dwelling,
Yes.
we're not here technically to discuss the dwelling under the
No,
building code and that kind of thing. The setbacks that we're looking at, even though the proposed development is what he's proposing, doesn't bind him to that development. He can build whatever he wants as long as he's within the code. So as far as talking about those things is not extremely relevant to our consideration. It is important because, yes, we have to understand what possibly could be built there if we grant these variances. So from that perspective, when you start talking about fire code and fire department and building code, that's nothing to do with this committee.
I'm talking about, I know it's not anything to do
So-
with it, but it should influence your decision.
To a degree, yes, but not particularly in this case. So if you can just stay to the variances that are being requested, that would be.
Yeah, it has to do with the 0.77 variance between the existing dwelling and the garage that he's so desperate to keep. That's what I'm referring to.
So just going back to that comment, you're saying it's 0.77 meter separation between the dwelling and the building.
That's
It
what
is not.
says in here.
It is 0.77 to the property line, not to the dwelling.
Okay, fair enough, but still, it's still under. He's made all of them worse. He approached the Committee of Adjustments after the meeting was done, after the meeting was not recorded last time.
For the record, to my knowledge, he did not approach the Committee of
Yeah, you
Adjustment.
logged off and we were all walked out by Taya, and we weren't allowed to stay.
Pardon me?
When you,
No, I'm not going to get into an argument. He did not approach the committee after the hearing.
he
We
did.
told him he can't talk to us.
There you go.
Okay,
So
but
there
we-
was no discussion that took place, just for the
Mr.
record.
Chair, I'm not trying to argue with you. What I'm trying to do is
Yeah,
state
but
that-
what you're implying there is that we conducted inappropriate activity, which is not true.
I said he approached you. Remember
And he
Gary?
was- And he was
said that?
rebuffed back, as the member
And
has
I
said.
never mentioned that you conducted anything. I never mentioned that there was a conversation held. I said he got to do that. We were ushered out. From our perspective, it didn't look favorable. Thank you.
Good. He started a conversation. We told him we can't talk about it.
No, and
He
that's,
sort of started another one and we said, we just told you. And that's as far as it went.
absolutely, absolutely. At the end of the day, 4 meters is close, too close. 100 centimeters was, Eric was, our chief planner, declined the application last time. He said it shouldn't be granted for 3 meters with side yard setbacks that were actually greater and a lot frontage that was actually greater last time. This time around, side yard setbacks are less, the frontage lot is less, and we've increased the front yard from 3 meters to 4 meters, and now that's approved. So 1 meter, 1.10 meters has changed the entire mind of everybody.
Again, not everyone.
Not everyone,
planner's
not
report.
everyone, but the planner's report,
fair
yes.
enough.
So I guess that's my concern there, was that it hasn't changed.
You're approaching your time limit. If you can wrap up.
Absolutely,
if there's
yep.
anything you say.
Yep, no problem. So again, I do think that it doesn't, that we're against it as the neighborhood. I'm trying not to repeat myself with the safety concerns, the closeness to the school, the sight lines, the fire department. You said that you can't speak to that, and that's fair. That's what the chief planner's report is for. But again, it's not clarified here for the public. We don't get a copy of their report. We don't get to see that. So I'm acting on the information that I have available to myself.
The planning report to this committee is online.
I have the planning report. I'm talking about the engineer technologist report and the fire department chief's report. Those are 1 sentences, if not 5 words in each one, saying like, hey, this has to be addressed. And it's, thank you.
To our planner.
Chair, through to the committee and to the member of the public, just to clarify, the comments from the fire chief are talking about the address of the property at 252 Division Street, meaning it needs to be readdressed. It needs a new address on Division Street, like 256 or 258 Division Street, to keep the numerical sequence if the lot is created. It is not a comment about addressing
Fire safety.
matters in the report. It is about the mailing address. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything further you'd like to add? You're at your 10 minutes.
No, I think I'll just be interrupted furthermore. So thank you for your time. Again, I don't think it stays within line with the neighborhood. I think that it's too close to the front. I think if we just agreed to do 6.5 meters, we wouldn't be here. If he'd have just agreed last time to take the garage down, he'd be halfway to where he needed to be. And you can't condition yourself into an approval at the end of the day.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to this application? Just name and address for the record.
Sorry, yep, it's on. Sorry, thank you. My name's Erin Andrews. I live at 250 Division Street, right beside the property or in question or that we're discussing tonight. I don't know if I have questions or just comments. I did a review of the report from October 8th to the new report of the November 14th. And I just were, just making some comments about the stark contrast in what was spoken to in the October 8th report to now what is changed and spoken to in the November 14th report. To begin with, I'll start kind of out of order, and that is just to speak to the garage and the request to have the garage stay. And if I do repeat what you've already read, please just say, Erin, we've heard it before and we know what you're talking about, because sometimes I will just go over things in my head. So in terms of the accessory structure without principal building, can I pause and get my glasses? I'm sorry. So I'm at that age, I'm sorry, I just gotta, so in the October report, it was clearly stated that the relief from section 2.8.1A I is not supported, that permitting an accessory building, the garage, to exist without a principal dwelling undermines the intent of the regulation and may result in the land use conflicts or inappropriate site use. Additionally, the request to permit the existing detached garage to remain without a principal building is not desirable. Section 2.81A of the zoning bylaw is intended to ensure that the accessory structures are subordinate and functionally related to the principal use. Allowing the garage to remain in isolation undermines this intent. Furthermore, the garage non-complying 1 meter side yard setback compounds the issue by reinforcing a built form that does not align with the standards of the zone. Supporting a reduced setback for a structure that should not exist independently would be an undesirable precedent. So in that report, what highlighted for me was the words that having this structure stay undermines the intent of the regulation. It permitting the garage to stay is not desirable and would set an undesirable precedent. And that was in the October 8th. And so in the November 14th, we've moved into that we are providing an opportunity to have the garage stay, but support the undermining of a regulation, support the undesirable precedents by the conditions to have the garage stay. So there was kind of like, there's these strong words used that it goes against everything that we believe in, but this report said, but maybe we will. So I just kind of, it's more of a commentary. It's like, it's just, so I do believe, like, if that was the opinion of staff in the October 8th, that this should not go forward with the garage based on, the intent of the regulation and that it's an undesirable precedent. I'm not too sure how we've gone further to have a conversation about a severance that should not happen because there's a building already there. However, we have gone there, so I did want to address some of the contrast between the two reports in several other areas, if that's okay. So number 2 that I wanted to take a look at was the front yard setback, and I think, we've already talked about today that 3 meters back was like, wow, that's kind of crazy. But adjusting it just 1 meter sounds still kind of crazy. I did walk out to my front yard. I did stand there for a while and take a look and go, it's still kind of crazy. So in the October 8th report, it was clearly stated that zoning bylaw 6575/30/18 does not have any residential zone types where the front yard setbacks for single detached dwellings are less than 6.5 meters. The variance as requested will have the effect of creating a lot that appears overbuilt. A front yard setback, and because this was from October 8th, of 3 meters represents a significant departure from the established 6.5 meter standard and would result in a dwelling that is substantially forward of adjacent homes, disrupting the rhythm of the streetscape. The extra 1 meter does not counter any of those points. It still does all of what the original report does in October 8th, in my opinion. In the new report of November 14th, it states that the new dwelling will not be the closest building to the street. Then it contradicts and says, while the proposed home will be the closest to the street than the neighboring property. So it will not, but then it will. It will meet all other setback requirements and therefore reasonable. It is reasonable to consider, my apologies. I get a little, it will meet all other setback requirements and therefore reasonable considering the other homes in the area. However, the talk back to that statement is it doesn't meet setback. So it's not meeting the setback requirements set by 6.5, not even for the 4 meters does. And the other buildings closer to the street are single-story garages that meet side yard setbacks, not front yards. That doesn't apply. And they are not a 2-story, 1,800 square foot sitting directly in front of my house. And it will be the closest to the street. So we went from this, from the October report to the November, the October saying, there is an effect of overbuilt. The proposed home is going to be significantly forward to the adjacent homes, and it does disrupt the rhythm. And then we've got to the place of disregarding those as well. Am I okay with time? Okay, so.
Another 2 minutes.
2 minutes? Okay. I have many more that just addresses the summary where it said that, the variance respecting the lot frontage could be supported. So that was the 12.4 in the original, 12.1 in this one, and that we were okay with that. However, according to the original report, that the rest of the release exceed what the staff considers to be reasonable for the R1 zone. Accordingly, the proposed variance does not maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. So with one change, we went from everything exceeded in October to, with this one change, no, it's okay again. So probably get my point that we could do a comparative contrast with other sections. If I had more times, I would go into my number 4 and number 5. Number 5 is just noting that the October 8th was, there was a conclusion and a recommendation that the variances was not minor in nature. And so I will challenge that I will challenge the new report, the November 4th, that says they are minor in nature. They are not minor in nature. I agree with the October 8th, and a 1 meter change doesn't disregard the rest. So, sorry. I'm just trying to sum up, so I appreciate you listening. I have more. I guess I should have printed it off and given it to you, but thank you for listening. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Is there any other members of the public who wish to speak to this application? Yes, sir. There you go.
My name is Brian Abbott. I live at 30 Ridgewood Avenue. It is a corner lot. And my garage, double car garage, is on Division Street. And just tell me to sit down if I'm out of line here. What I'm concerned about is the parking. Right now, we have a nice little neighborhood between Ridgewood and Rosemount with another big dwelling, 1,800 square feet. Probably 5 or 6 people could move in there. They might have 5 or 6 cars. And with narrow frontage, where are they going to park the cars? On the street. Well, we don't have curbs or gutters. There's a lot of seniors walking up and down the street with walkers and the carts and everything. The school buses come around, that's what my concern is. And most of the neighbors were just 100% against this severance. If it was set back, they'd have lots of parking spots. But very rarely do you see cars parked on the street unless somebody's having a big party or something between Ridgewood and Rosemont. Everybody parks their cars in their garages. Well, he's so close to the street, he maybe have room to park 2 cars. Like my driveway, I can park 6 cars. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that wishes to speak to this application this evening?
This is Frank Dursi speaking. Can you hear me?
Yes, we'll go to the applicant.
Okay, just to clarify, there will be parking for about 6 cars. The driveway will be 92 feet long. That's how far it is from the road to the existing garage. There'll be room for 2 cars in the front and potentially 4 more cars on the driveway that will encompass that property. So, and plus there will be 3 garage ports that somebody could park in as well. So there's ample parking on the property. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. And sorry, was there anyone else that wishes to speak to this application? Not seeing any. Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to come back to the chief planner based on a comment from the second last presenter, and it had to do with undesirable precedent. And so was that in reference to there being, which I think you've covered off in the development agreement, this accessory building with no house? Is that what that was referring to? Or was it referring to the fact that the location of the garage, without the recent changes, was an undesirable precedent for as to how much it stuck out? So I'm trying to think if that was conducive to just the garage or the new format with the garage and the changes in the house.
Is
Through the chair.
This is Frank Gerson again. Can I clarify that one, if I may?
Yeah, if the applicant wants to address that, we can start there.
So the existing garage sits 92 feet back from the road. It will not be sticking out at all. Like a lot of homes that are in that community, the house will be a separate structure behind the newly built home.
I understand that. I understand that.
Through the chair to the.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that just so everybody understood where the location of that garage is.
Yes, that's fine. The question was addressed to the planner, so he's gonna elaborate.
Through the chair to the member. The commentary was about the idea that we would approve a variance to section 2.8 AI of the zoning bylaw, in that when we do a variance for, say, a front yard setback where 6.5 meters is required, there's a proposal to have 4 meters. In the instance of this garage not meeting that criteria, it was a request to just forget that policy of the zoning bylaw. And that is what we said when I wrote the report, was, in my opinion, not a avenue that we wanted to go down, and it's not something I want to support. It's not a variance in effect. It's an ask to be excused from a policy or a section of the zoning bylaw altogether. Where that comes back into tonight's report is that if you look at 2.AI or 2.1 AI, it talks about the ability to use the development agreement in instances where a garage may exist on a property in advance of the primary dwelling being built. So if we're talking about how we could approach this, in my report, not willing to approach this by waiving the policy altogether and forgetting the requirement, but am willing to consider it, excuse me, through a development agreement or temporary use bylaw.
Very good. Any other questions? Dave.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Eric. So those two options for the garage to remain, do they only apply to the current owner? If the property is sold, do either one of those conditions stop?
Yeah, through the member, or through the chair to the member. We would be, development agreement, we would be registering on title. So that would apply to the next owner as well.
The reason I asked that is just come in when we were talking about it, and that's a problem for me with that. Those either of those two conditions would not end on transfer of property. Yeah, that's a big problem for me. Okay, thank you.
I guess to your point, it'd be no different than if someone had a lot and there's nothing on it, and they wanted to build a garage first to store their tools in while they're building the house. This is just going in reverse. The dwelling's already existing. They would still need a temporary use permit to have the dwelling there before they finish the house. And if they never started building the house, I would assume that when that time frame runs out, because there's a time frame, they're not in compliance with the bylaw, and then zoning would go after them and say, okay, you got to tear it down because you're not in compliance with the... It's really no different. It's just in reverse here because it's already existing. Is that a fair...
Yeah, I think through the chair to the member, no, and to the chair's comment, that's correct. And the temporary use bylaw is a bylaw passed by council, so it applies to the property regardless of who owns it. It's a development agreement piece that's registered on title that applies to whoever owns it. It's going to stay with that until we release it.
Right. Any other questions, Eric?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I see that there may be some glazed openings on the existing garage that would be facing the proposed lot line. And there is quite the reduction in that lot line. So I'm wondering if we received any comments in regards to limited separation distances.
Through through the chair to the member, no, building didn't have any comments on that. I think typically in new construction they may, but as an existing building they didn't. Now that said, you could, the committee could consider additional conditions that deal with windows.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I think I will want to introduce a condition on that when the time comes.
And just for a point of clarity, would that be a condition on the
severance
consent or the variance? Or not?
The severance.
On the severance, okay. Any other questions? Gary.
3 to the planner. So it was mentioned by the first speaker. So if seems to me that the garage is somewhat of a point of contention in all of this. So if the garage was not there, the home to be built and the separation distances could all be met?
Through the chair to the member, the minor variance is only seeking one relief for the proposed dwelling, and that's the front yard setback. It is meeting both of the interior side yard setbacks, and it meets the rear yard setback. And as I think was discussed earlier, there's more than enough lot area for coverage. So yes, the other matters deal with the garage. So in theory, if the garage was not there, then there would be, the only variance required would be on the side of the existing dwelling at presently 252 and its reduction in its interior side yard.
So going with that, I'm always struck that we talk about the 4 tests and that. And on 8/19/25, second page on this, be granted for the following reasons. The second one is desirable for the appropriate development of the land, as the proposed variants have been requested to facilitate the development of a new single-family detached dwelling on a newly created lot. Well, is it not true that, from what you've just said, that the newly detached home could be built? It's not like it's boxed in, to your point, with land. It's boxed in to not facilitate the front yard setback because this building is there. So the home could be facilitated. It's not like it's boxed in and we're trying to seek variances to make a developable lot.
Gary, if I might, real quick.
Sure. We have a developable lot.
Well, with the exception of the frontage.
Yes.
So they need a variance for the frontage because it doesn't comply, the frontage of the lot.
I guess what I was hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the removal of the garage could eliminate that variance.
The lot is still too narrow to comply. So
okay, I thought you were talking about frontage depth as opposed to width.
Correct. The setback, yes,
Yeah.
could potentially eliminate, but the lot width would still need a variance for the new lot.
Yeah. That's true. The other two did have a variance to it. All right, thank you.
No problem. Any other questions or comments? Does anyone have a recommendation? Eric. And if I might, if you could keep variance, sorry, bear with me here a second. The one for the new lot, A19 separate if you're going to try to do them all together.
You want to keep it separate?
If you want to keep the consent and A18 together, that's fine, but just 19 if you can keep it separate.
Okay. In application A18-25-PC and B10-25-PC, Plan 47, Lot 2, Lot 3, new Plan 878 in the city of Port Colborne, municipally known as 252 Division Street, be granted for the following reasons. The application is minor in nature. It is desirable for the appropriate development of the land. It maintains the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. It maintains the general intent and purpose of the official plan. Through you, Mr. Chair, I do want to add that condition as an amendment, so I'm not sure if you'd like me to do that now or put this on the floor.
You can add it now since you're the one reading it off. You can.
Yeah. And that in the condition of, in the decision of B10-25-PC, that an additional condition be implemented from that of the staff report, stating that the applicant provide drawings or elevation drawings to demonstrate that the existing garage conforms with the limited distance separation requirements under the Ontario Building Code. Thank you. Right, to the satisfaction of staff.
Sorry, I'm just writing this down. All right, can I get a seconder to that? Gary. So just from my point of clarity, so you moved B10 and A18, correct? All right, perfect. Any other questions or comments? Dave.
Just so I get it straight, go back to what Member Bruno asked, planner. The garage is gone. Can you still build the house with a 4-meter setback? That's what I want to know. From the front property line.
Just a point of order. So right now the motion on the floor is just for the severance and the existing dwelling.
Oh, okay. Sorry, my bad.
And I guess to your point is why I wanted it separated. We can address.
We'll save that till after.
We can save that for A19 when it gets moved. But any other questions or comments on the motion on the floor? All those in favor? That'll be carried. So now to the second part, part 2, A19. Gonna get a mover to that. Eric.
That application A19-25PC, Plan 47, Lot 2, Lot 3, new Plan 878 in the city of Port Colborne, municipally known as 252 Division Street, be granted for the following reasons. The application is minor in nature. It is desirable for the appropriate development of the land. It maintains the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. It maintains the general intent and purpose of the official plan.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder to that? Gary? Questions or comments? Dave?
Now I'll ask my question. Can you build a house without the garage at a 4-meter setback from the front property line?
Through the chair to the member, if the committee approves the variance for a 4-meter front yard setback, regardless of whether the garage is there or not, then yes, a home could be built 4 meters. It could be a 2-story home, a single-story home. Any structure could be within 4 meters.
Eric.
That's right. Through you, Mr. Chair, I guess I do have comments. So there's been a lot of comments regarding the sightlines and in particular to the front yard setback. And in my view of this and looking at, lot fabric on the Niagara Navigator, yes, a lot of the lots on the properties and buildings constructed that have frontage along Division Street are typically on exterior. They're typically exterior lot lines, but nevertheless, their structures are quite close to the front, what would be the lot line that is on Division Street. So in many ways, it acts similarly. It has a similar impact in terms of sight lines. And secondly, in regards to the roadway, the property itself is 4 meters, but there's an additional setback to the roadway, to the actual road where there would be potential impacts from sightlines like accidents and whatnot. So, and I don't anticipate, and I don't know if staff can clarify, but that street is already, the right-of-way is already 20 meters. That right-of-way is not expanding, and that street is a local roadway that is not in need of any widening. So if anything, I think they would put, the future of the city would be to put sidewalks down and put maybe storm sewers, let's say. Anyway, neither of those would have impacts on sightlines. So I think there's no sightline impacts for those reasons, and this is consistent with the lot fabric of the municipality. So those are my opinions.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Gary.
I'm still trying to figure out your comments about variances that need to happen, and I understand that responded that way to Member Elliott's comments and to the chief planner, that the home, not this home, a home, could still be built there with an appropriate setback if there was no garage. Is that correct?
Through the chair to the member, yes, that is correct. A home could be, if there was no garage, even if the garage was to stay, I believe that there's room between the garage and the rear of the dwelling to move that proposed building envelope back towards the garage. I think it comes at a cost of access to half of the garage, but it would, there is, I'd have to pull my drawing up here.
3.69 meters.
There is still, exactly, there's still 3.6 meters between the rear of the home and the garage. And depending on the construction type, there was a question earlier about attaching the garage to a dwelling. That is an option. Or there is likely call it a 1.2 to 1.5 meter distance that would need to be maintained between the garage and the house. So there's still potentially 2 meters of room that could exist there with the garage in place, or with the garage removed. The home could be located until it runs into the rear yard setback, which has not been a point of discussion at any point in this meeting because the lot is the depth that it is.
One last question here surrounding the tests. It is desirable for the appropriate development of the land as proposed variances have been requested to facilitate the development of a new single detached dwelling on a newly created lot. My view in this is that those tests are to help facilitate growth, help facilitate a severance allowing for a new home, which is desirable. But would you say that this desirability and appropriate development is supposed to have regard for the rest of the neighborhood and the surrounding development? I've always heard it explained that way, going way back in one of the courses, but I think we need to be having regard for that. In other words, there's a house that can be built with that setback. I won't go through all the things you've indicated. So that facilitates the development of a new single-family house, which we all are for. But is it appropriate? And that house could be appropriate to that specific lot, but it should have regard to the entire neighborhood. That's how I read that. So thank you for your answer. It's just more of a statement than a question.
And I guess to your point, that is the purpose of our committee, is to determine that, whether it's minor in nature, it's appropriate, and so on and so forth. From my perspective, there is only one of the variances that kind of absolutely has to be approved for the other part to happen, and that is the minimum front yard width of 12.1 meters versus the 15. That is an absolute, otherwise they can't sever. With respect to the other two, those are the ones I guess are debatable, whether we consider those to be appropriate for the development and minor in nature and before tests. And the reason I guess I asked to separate this one out is because I'm still, in this particular case, but for that garage, is the only reason why we're being asked to move this forward. I could see if that garage was already placed at the very back of the lot and it couldn't be moved, and that would be a different consideration. The fact that the existing dwelling on part 1 is set back pretty far, I think further enhances the need to only satisfy the applicant to save some money to not have to tear it down. If there was some historical value or some other compelling reasons why you didn't want to have that removed, that could be considered as well. But from my perspective, I think the 6.5 could be complied with. There'd still be plenty of room. You're already the applicant's already proposing to build another garage in the front. So obviously they don't need it for parking, because they would have another facility in the front for parking. So it'd really be a giant storage shed if you can move it farther back and still comply with the 6.5 and still squeeze a house in front of it. So that's why I separated. As the motion on the floor is to all three, at this point in time I would object, because I don't think the 4 meters is really required to be done. I'm assuming that could be argued by anybody, but in this particular case, for some of the reasons you've mentioned and the fact that it could be facilitated if the garage wasn't there, I'd be in favor of the 12.1 meter width. That's not that big of a change. We've seen that many times in the past. And if the garage isn't going to stay, then the side yard setback isn't a pertinent one either, to that point. I'm okay with leaving the 0.77 meters side yard setback. I won't object to it, but we've done that before. That's not that big of a, we're talking a few inches from 1 meter to 0.77 meters. So,
hello, yeah.
So from,
can I interject for a second? It's Frank Gerson. Can I add one?
Just 1 second there for you. So from that perspective, that's kind of where I stand. Before we go to the applicant, Eric, you wish to ask a question?
I guess through, I was saying that if we wanted to split out the particular variances, I'm not sure if we can necessarily do that.
Sorry, say that again.
You know how you're saying the lot front, like you're in support of the lot frontage, but not potentially the front yard setback, if we could vote on them separately, but I guess maybe not.
Well, I guess technically we can vote on them separately by making a motion to remove one of those or both of those to the main motion on the floor. We can certainly do that. That is a potential possibility. I'm not making that at the moment, but that is a possibility to amend the original motion. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. So with that, I know the applicant had asked to ask something or comment, so I will turn the floor to the applicant.
Thank you very much. So if the only remaining issue is the 4 meter setback from the road, can we come to a compromise? I've already removed one minor variance. I've increased the distance of the newly built house from the property line from 3 to 4 meters. The bylaw is 6.5 meters, which I don't believe you'll find.
Just hold on a second. Oh, can you hold a second there, Eric?
Sorry, I don't understand the rationale of letting the applicant speak again when we've already gone through the public portion and we've had a motion on the floor and we're about to vote, and it's on the members, not the public. So if we open the door to him to speak, then the public should have to be able to refute or rebut any new information that's provided. So,
I hear your concern. However, the last part of every discussion we have is the applicant has the final word to add anything they wish. Now, normally we have it before there's a motion on the floor. I agree. And the applicant was afforded some closing comments if they desired. So that is, I guess, another point that we have already made. So with that, I will accept your point of order. And the unfortunate part is to the applicant, at this point in time, your comments will have to be withheld at this point until the committee either resolves this motion favorably or unfavorably. If it's unfavorably, then we could possibly go back to the applicant to help us get to a decision if need be. So with that, to the motion on the floor then, is there any other questions of committee members with regards to the motion on the floor? So to your point, like I said, I would be in favor of the first point being the front yard reduction to 12.1 meters. I'm not in favor of item 2, and then item 3 may become a moot point. However, the one point I would caution committee members that if we struck 2 and left 3 to save the garage, if they tore down the garage, they would still have the ability to build a garage still 0.77 meters closer to that property line, regardless of that one, because we would have granted that that variance. And I don't believe we differentiate between this side yard or that side yard. I don't know if that's something we can restrict and say to the westerly side yard. At least it'd be to the applicant's current property if he retains it. If we were to strike 2 and do that, I would then also amend that the interior side yard, westerly interior side yard, be reduced to 0.77 as an additional amendment. So did you want to have something else? I will move that motion if you want in a second, but if you wanted to comment before that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think I just want to raise a comment that I think we got to be careful as a committee kind of trying to say like, oh, the applicant can do X, Y, Z, or can do like, there's always different things the applicant can do. I think we have to look at this application based on what's requested and what the 4 tests are. And when you're looking at it, I think that this does meet the test, just as planning staff stated in their report. And so the applicant's always afforded that ability to go to the OLT in the event that they would like to. And I understand that based on staff's report and what's before us, I think we have a tough hill to climb, but that's neither here or nor there at this time. I would like to keep the motion as is and have a formal vote on that. And then if a new motion needs to be made, then we'll do that.
So if I might, just to your point that you just made, you say it's based on the development that they're proposing. That's not exactly correct, in the sense that, yes, they're saying I'm going to build this today. Our decision does not bind him to that. But it does bind, if we say 0.77, he decides not to do it. Whatever we do with condition 2, whether it stays, whether it goes, is irrelevant, sells the property with these variances on it, that 0.77 stays there regardless. He could blow down the garage and, like I say, could build something else and still be that. So that's why I'm only saying that, yes, we should consider what he's got, but we also have to consider what potentially could happen as well.
If that's a concern, which is certainly a valid concern, we have the mechanism of the development agreement that is proposed. So as part of the development agreement, you could make it that he builds it in compliance with the construction drawings he provided, as well as the severance sketch that was provided as well. So that is a mechanism that's available, and maybe the planner can comment.
Through the chair, or to the chair, I suppose there's an option similar to what was done earlier tonight, where you could tie the 0.77 to the existing building through a condition in the variance. So you could tie it 0.77 for the existing garage, and that would limit it to that. And if that structure was removed in the future, that 0.77 would go away with it.
Another consideration. So I know what you're saying, and I didn't hear you say call the question. So I'm going to put a motion on the floor to strike condition 2 and change condition 3 to be for just the existing dwelling. and ask for a seconder. Dave, questions or comments on the amendment? Eric.
I'm just asking for clarification on what the amendment is, sorry. Can you just clarify?
So the clarification is to strike condition 2, which is the minimum front yard setback of 4 meters. So it would remain as the bylaw states, and to change the existing condition 3 where it says the side yard setback of 77.77, it should be meters, not centimeters, meters, but that only be tied to the existing dwelling. So if that dwelling was to be removed, they would then have to comply with a 1 meter setback as per the bylaw, or whatever the zoning bylaw happens to be at the time for the permit. Clear? Okay. Gary, any questions? Okay. So to the amendment on the floor, all those in favor? That'll be carried. Opposed? Okay. You're either for or you're against. So with that, now back to the main motion, which is now eliminating condition 2 and amending condition 3 as discussed. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor? That'll be opposed. It'll be carried. Thank you. Very good. So that resolves that particular application. Now, we do have a couple more items on the agenda. For those, the applicant is, for those in the audience, there is a 20-day waiting period for any potential appeals. That could happen, but after the 20 days, then the committee's decisions will then be followed through with, along with the conditions for the severance that were so indicated. So with that, going back to our agenda, sorry, I went too far. Is there any other business that anyone wishes to bring up this evening? Not seeing any. We have the minutes of the October 8th meeting. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Gary, Eric?
I'm having a hard time understanding what's just going on. What just happened?
So to the applicant that was just there, we did move and grant the variance for a condition 1, which is the frontage requirement. We struck condition 2, so you do not get your front yard setback, and you do have a kind of a conditional approval for the 0.77 meter side yard setback for the existing garage. But if you tear down the existing garage, or someone tears down the existing garage, then you need to get to the original bylaw requirements.
Okay, so I got it straight. Everything was approved except for the 4 meter setback.
Basically, yes.
Okay, can we come to a compromise?
No, it is over. We've made our decision and that's it. You have 20 days to appeal that decision, and you can contact the clerk with regards to how to do that.
Okay, so if I comply with the 6.5 meter setback, then I'm okay to build?
Yes, and if you need further clarifications, you can contact the planning department and they will advise you what was just passed. All right?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
You bet. So with that, did I get the meeting minutes? Yes. So all those in favor, that'll be carried. Now, there was an amendment to our agenda. So although this concludes the public portion of our meeting, the committee will be going into a closed session to discuss a verbal report on potential litigation pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, Section 239 2E, that we will be discussing, and because it pertains to potential litigation, these matters are able to be done in camera. So with that, we will not be coming back into public session following that portion, the in-camera portion. So for that, I conclude the public portion of our hearing this evening. Thank you.